Sorry, Adelaide, we can't hear you.
There we go. I'm good. Lovely. So my name is Adelaide. I am a registered midwife, as Kia has said, and I work in an NHS trust in London as a caseloading midwife, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about that. Black Beetle Health is a UK-based public health community organisation. So we promote health, well-being and equality for marginalised communities, and we focus specifically or we like to give specific focus to issues that affect LGBTQ and people of colour, and we do that by kind of developing evidence-based resources and signposting to culturally safe support services.
Thank you so much. And then we also have Aisha Davies, who is a CQC registered manager at her GP practice and one of the founders of Black Mothers Matter UK. Would you like to just give a quick intro?
So yes, my name's Aisha Davies. I work as a GP in Bristol. My patient group is predominantly white British. I am also one of the founders of Black Mothers Matter, and what we are doing is trying to change the narrative surrounding motherhood and birth when it comes specifically to Black women, and try and empower women by funding doulas and educational resources for them to have as much support as possible when trying to navigate their pregnancy and birth.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that intro. So just for newcomers that have just come in, I have asked everybody to make sure that they mute and don't show their videos as we are recording. So we'll just go straight into it, and I'll be asking the first question to Aisha. So the first question is, what conversations around Black mothers' maternity do you think are not happening outside of the health sector?
Yeah, great question. I think it's important for us to realise that actually before, I would say, the last few months, no conversations at all have been happening outside of health sectors. Yes, you may find within the Black community some of these conversations happening, but actually on the whole, if you asked, say 6 months ago, if you asked the majority of people if they had any awareness at all about the disparities between outcomes between Black women and white women in Britain, most would have absolutely no idea. So I would say actually all of it is not being discussed. It's not being discussed that Black women are more likely to die. Mm-hmm. Well, it is more now, but on the whole, that's not discussed. It's not discussed that we're at high risk of miscarriage, whether we have an IVF pregnancy or not. It's not discussed that we are at high risk of stillbirth in this country too. So lots of these facts are sort of discussed a bit within medical circles, but even then, I would say it's not something that comes up very frequently. So if it's not coming up frequently within medical circles, it certainly isn't coming up frequently beyond medical circles.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Do you agree, Adelaide, or do you have a different opinion?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think I would say not only is it, you know, I'm still meeting practitioners who don't know about the stats, and I find that quite shocking. But equally, I would admit that, you know, when I was training and kind of in sort of early after I qualified, I probably wasn't really aware, and the trend has been going on for decades. It's just that in the last sort of, you know, the report that was published in 2018 and the report that was published in 2019 by Embrace, which just kind of looking at maternal mortality and babies as well. That's when it kind of really came to the fore. So I basically just agreed that if health professionals don't know what's going on, then wider professionals, you know, that aren't involved in maternity care maybe don't know what's going on, and certainly other people just, you know, have no idea.
Yeah, I think that that's a very valid point. If health professionals themselves are not fully aware, then it would make sense that the wider public would then also be lacking if they're not actually within the field. So then that leads me on to the next question. What precautions do you currently think that Black women in particular should be taking?
So a really difficult question, because I think one of the problems is that we see these statistics and we put the onus on Black women to change things, and it's okay, how does a Black woman navigate through a system that is potentially stacking up against her? Now, of course, that's one bit, but the other bit is actually there needs to be wider changes to make things fairer and make outcomes fairer. So if we're just looking at what women can do, what Black women specifically can do, we know that if you educate yourself and you are strong in your assertions and your beliefs, then that is very important, and that will enable you to have proper open conversations with the team that are looking after you, rather than it being a paternalistic management of care, which leaves you open to potentially having some biases in play. So I'm very pro people educating themselves about pregnancy and birth and about their own risk factors. So not all Black women are going to have the same risk factors, you know, depending on your family history, depending on your specific circumstances. So it's worth you actually looking deeply at what specifically may affect you. And for you to think, you know, when you're thinking about birth plans, it's worth thinking, well, if this happens, this is actually what I want. And if this happens, this is what I want. And if a medical professional comes to me and offers Y, then I'm going to have ABC questions, and then I'll make a decision. So it's not to say that medical professionals are all out to get you. That's not what I'm saying at all. But we do know that, well, certainly from research in America, we haven't really got research in Britain yet to support this, but we do know that white mothers are more likely to have a conversation where they are involved in their treatment and their plan, whereas Black women are more likely to sort of sit down, listen, have a plan relayed to them, and go along with said plan. So they're more likely to feel that they haven't been involved in their treatment plan and in the process, and that of course leads to you feeling completely disempowered, and that's not what we want for women, for birthing people in general. So I think women can empower themselves if they can afford a doula or an advocate. Great, not all women can, and that's why Black Mothers Matter are working to try and increase funds so that we can help that. But even if you can be adequately resourced with information, you are going to be better off. You are going to be better off having those conversations, and you're going to feel more like you are more in control of all the mayhem that happens around you when you're pregnant and birthing.
Adelaide, would you like to give any input to that?
Yeah, I think Aisha just got so many great points there. I guess I just wanted to take one step back and just, you know, talk about what the actual UK maternal death rate is, because my concern is that actually there are people that are maybe in pregnancy or planning pregnancies that are kind of becoming worried and you know, might have a level of panic. And although yes, the disparities are unacceptable, you know, we should really, you know, we should know already why there is this health disparity, you know, an increased chance of dying in pregnancy and in childbirth, but it's also kind of 6 months after as well. 6 weeks after, that's kind of what we're looking at. And there's also figures about up to a year after. But just to sort of, for figures, just in case, you know, kind of people are interested in figures. So the maternal death rate in the UK is a 9.2 in 100,000. So if you like percentages, it's like 0.0092. And the reason that we're kind of, you know, up in arms about it, and rightly so, is because Black women only make up 4% of the birthing population, but actually they're 18% of the proportion of women that die. So that's kind of like the thing, you know, just to sort of bring everything down. You know, I'm thinking in terms of activism and in terms of lobbying, you know, we really need to keep the energy up. But in terms of you as a birthing person, you know, kind of just keep these numbers in mind. In terms of precautions, all the things that Aisha said about being prepared, about knowing about your family history, because what we know is that the leading cause of maternal death is like cardiac disease. So knowing if you've got some kind of family history of cardiac disease, what for most women, you know, they only discover that they have some kind of cardiac disease in pregnancy because the blood volume increases so significantly. It's kind of like I think it's up to like a 50% increase. So you know, you can look out for signs that something might not be quite right. So, you know, if you're having breathlessness when you're not doing anything, that's a really important kind of sign to notice. Obviously a red flag would be any kind of chest pain, making sure that you're going and kind of getting that sorted out. So there are sort of precautions that people can take, but again, I really believe like the onus should not be on the person accessing the service. You know, if I'm a health professional, like it is my job to make sure that you are safe and that you are listened to. And yeah, there's lots of evidence that suggests in the US and some stuff in the UK that is not happening for people.
So then just moving on to the next question, Adelaide, I wanted to ask, with the rise of doulas online, do you think that this is a practice that long-term could be worked alongside midwives and just general maternal care? And could you also explain what doulas are for perhaps audience members who don't?
Yeah, absolutely. So a doula is a non-medical professional who acts as a companion throughout kind of the childbirth journey, so pregnancy right up into the postnatal period. And ultimately they're kind of a birth, you know, they can become sort of like, I guess they're like a professional friend. That's probably the best way to think about them, because they accompany you. They can help you sort of access various bits of information, including kind of, you know, preparation. So it's a really like holistic approach to birth work and care. And I guess what I would say is that there was a time when I used to think that if a birthing person requires a doula, then somehow as a midwife I've failed. Because they're accessing kind of this outside support. But actually what I think about kind of doulas, as much as sort of in the immediacy they are used as advocates, so kind of making sure that people feel comfortable in asserting their choices, maybe even being primed when they go to their appointments so they understand what kind of things are going to be discussed and how to really, you know, get their choices. But there's something about the way that some people sort of in our kind of modern society birth maybe without community support, without family role models, or, you know, anything like that. And so a doula can kind of come into that place. And so I think it's, you know, there's been a big thing recently about there's a hashtag but not maternity, and this is about COVID-19, people not being allowed to have birth, you know, a birth partner, or they're only allowed one birth partner. So if they've got a doula, then their doula may not be allowed in with them. And actually we should think about doulas, although they are being paid as professionals, as an extension of that person's support network and their family, and it's really important to honour that. So in terms of being a maternity professional and working alongside doulas and, you know, families, I think that anything that is around your choice, anything is around the decisions that you're making, and I'm giving you information and you're kind of telling me that you've just understood it and you're making those choices, I'm there to support anything that you're doing. I'm there to make it work for you. And if that involves an extra person, then I'm there to work with them. And I just think that, you know, realistically, we shouldn't see doulas as a problem, as any kind of problem. We should just see it as like an extension of family and an additional support for that person.
Mm. I really do like that point that you made in terms of the extension of family. I think that is really important, valued role that somebody should be taking up. And I do think that's an interesting way to look at it. Aisha, do you have a similar opinion from a GP's perspective, or?
I mean, I think I'll probably talk from my perspective as a new mum.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave birth 7 months ago, and I didn't have a doula. But what I would say is that in an ideal world, you would have one midwife who does all your appointments prenatally, and they're that same midwife that you see and you birth with. But in reality, that doesn't happen. Or I mean, I'm sure it does for some women, but in reality, it's less likely that's going to happen. So one of the real benefits, I think, is there's just one person that knows you actually more than anyone else, apart from your spouse if you have one. But in terms of what your preferences are, what your fears are, and that I think is wonderful for some people, and for some people it's essential. For some people it allows them a calm space. They feel that it's okay because they've got someone who knows what they've said before it's all crazy and they're in absolute agony, someone who's listened to them when things were calm. So I think there are lots of positives about doulas, and actually if you look at other countries around the world, it's not a strange thing. You know, it's actually a very, very common thing. So it feels sometimes like an affront. I'm sure it does to some professionals. I'm sure it does. A bit like as a GP, if I had someone who came in and they had someone else who was advocating for them, I would feel like, oh, there's another person adding to this dynamic. So I absolutely understand why it might feel slightly strange, but I think for that birthing person, it really can be incredibly empowering for them. So for me personally, I think doulas have been great. I've got lots of friends who had doulas through their births, and they had only positive things to say. So I do think they can be incredibly positive.
Thank you so much for that. So the next question that I had was for Adelaide again, and it was, how do you think our current system here reflects a Eurocentric structure of how the birthing process should be done in the UK?
I thought about this question. I think about this question quite a lot. This idea of like Eurocentricity, and just to sort of distill that a little bit further, I kind of looked at you know, how people might define that, and it's basically the belief that, you know, non-Western kind of history or practices are perceived to be like primitive or in an early stage of development, and so they don't have value. And I guess what I would say is that within healthcare, I think that things kind of move with personal agenda. Mm-hmm. So we like the idea that it's kind of really objective and stuff like that, but I actually don't think that's the case. And so potentially it's a Eurocentric kind of system because it's been influenced by people that were predominantly from the West, kind of shaping the way that care is given, the way that interventions are kind of created, and stuff like that. I guess when we're thinking about what that means for somebody that's you know, pregnant or birthing, I guess we really do need to think about like how we respect or how we look at culture, and how we might discard some cultural preferences or cultural practices at the expense, you know, in favour of kind of Western culture and Western practices. So as a kind of example of this, I was thinking about whether practices allow space for traditions that might involve lots of people at birth. You know, if that is culturally something that occurs for you. And I've worked in units where actually, you know, there were lots of people in the birth room, and it kind of felt like, oh, right, okay. You know, this is, even for me, because, you know, we talk about, I think one thing that we need to kind of really remember is that, you know, race is a social construct. So, you know, in terms of like genetics and stuff like that, it has very little founding, and it was used to justify the treatment of non-white people, you know, a poor treatment of non-white people, and because of that kind of idea, actually when we talk about race, sometimes actually what we mean is culture. So my culture is white British, British. My mum was born in the UK. Our family's kind of like very kind of British centric. So even when I meet people that have the same skin colour as me, and they choose to do things that kind of might feel really unfamiliar to me, and there's this kind of assumption that all black people are this monolith, you know, we're all the same, and I think there's a real danger in that. So I'm always, you know, we talk about kind of privileges and bias, you know, I'm always going through that process, because I know that my standpoint is very probably like British, quite Western in a lot of ways, and so there's a danger of me kind of slipping into that idea of like, oh well, this is how it's done and you're doing it this way, and that feels really like alien. You know, you have to keep checking yourself. So yeah, I would say that there is some bits about it that is this kind of sort of, you know, Western orientated structures, the way that family structures might be slightly different, the way that connections with extended family might be slightly different, but also I guess these sorts of stereotypes that are held can really work sort of adversely for people, because if we make assumptions like, oh well, they can just do this because that's what they do, then sometimes we're not offering the help that's actually available for people when it's appropriate. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it was really good because you gave quite a few definitions as well, so it did for me. Aisha, do you want to give any input to that?
So I agree with everything you said. I think you're right in that the system, when I think about how Eurocentric medicine is, I go right the way back to medical school, and I think about the fact that when you're a baby doc, you're newly qualified, you haven't even, you know, you haven't been able to work on the wards in Britain, you go on an elective, and they'll say, you can choose anywhere in the world, you go on this elective, and you can practice medicine. Okay, so then you have all these people that say, great, I want to go to, I don't know, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, somewhere in the Caribbean, wherever it is. And there is an innate feeling that it's okay if I do something beyond my competence here, because I'm going to help them out. And so it starts there. It starts with the nugget of the way we do things here is better, and the way other people do things elsewhere is less good. And once you start from that standpoint, it is very difficult to have truly individualized care. For me, I had my mother and my husband in while I was birthing, but actually I also wanted my sister there. And lots of people were, you know, why would you want so many people in the room? Actually, culturally, for me, I was born in London, but to African parents who were born in Ghana. I felt that for me, I wanted more people there, and I couldn't. That it was, to maximum. There's no discussion. You absolutely cannot have any more than that. End of. And we know that in other cultures and other societies, things are different. Now, I'm not saying that. I completely understand there are logistical reasons for certain things, but it is important for us to think about why these decisions are made and who makes them and who is the woman in mind when these decisions are made. And we know that actually Black women make a very, very small percentage of birthers in the UK. But we're certainly not at the forefront of thought when people are planning rooms and systems and structures. So yeah, I think the Eurocentric view of birthing and medicine in general starts years before, and it will be very, very difficult for us to change that. But I think we can. I'm optimistic. If you're not optimistic, then I probably would have. So yeah, that's all I had to add.
Aisha, I think that's so sorry, Kid, that was just so beautifully put, because you just hit on so many things where I was like, yeah, and I hear about, students all the time going to this place and doing this thing that they've never done before, and just thinking, why does that seem okay to you? And I think one sort of really key thing is about our education systems, and the thing about Eurocentricity, if we kind of, let's just substitute this and just say white is elevated, right? If we're talking about skin colour, because I think sometimes that can help people. It means that even if you're not a white skin colour, the likelihood is that you may give better treatment to somebody who has got white skin because of the way that you were trained, because of the techniques that you were taught on how to recognise this condition or that condition in certain skin tones, or not told anything at all. It's unbelievable that everything is taught about, people being pink and healthy, when there's such a range of skin tones. We're talking about Black people specifically, that once you get past naturally sort of light skinned, pink doesn't really influence, or if you're looking at jaundice, the yellow doesn't always kind of influence. You have to be teaching other things. And I think one of the and I might be drifting off into other territory here, but one of the key things is that, health professionals, we all kind of have this thing of but we're all just so compassionate and loving, and we we just treat everybody exactly the same, and actually we just need to have a moment and really just think about in our internal thoughts about the prejudices that we hold, but not just think about them, actually think about them in situations where we can apply them. So when you're going into somebody and saying, right, how might I hold power in this situation? How might, what I say or what I think kind of overshadow what this person actually needs. And there's a really brilliant article that was co-authored by the student midwife journal editor Alicia Burnett, and basically she was talking about nursing and midwifery education and the way that it does need to change, and that in itself, although we're still kind of going into a structure that is stacked against, if we can at least get the training right, get people in places where they can make a difference, because what we see is as you go higher up in terms of seniority in certain institutions, things kind of get whiter. Probably I think maternity is probably one of the areas where it doesn't necessarily get more male as it might do in other institutions, but we need to we need to start, you're right, actually, we just need to start right back here, because we're working within this system, we're training people to fit into this system, and so that is exactly what they're doing regardless of their skin colour. So, you know, there's a lot of work to do, but there are people doing work, there's pockets of work, and we just need to really join it up.
I think that's really valuable points that both of you have made. I think it's really important to think about who these structures were created for initially. So I think it's very valuable that both of you mentioned that, because it makes a lot of sense when you think about long term as to why there's issues for particular communities. So the next question that I wanted to ask both of you actually is, so from some of the conversations that I've had, some Black mothers have commented on the lack of respect given to them during the birthing process, and how they may have felt pressure to follow a particular route in contrast to what they initially wanted. What type of ways do you think Black women can challenge this, but also health professionals, how they can challenge themselves?
Let's go.
What I mean, in terms of being listened to and feeling ignored or feeling disrespected, most of that comes down to communication. And a lot of disharmony between patients and health professionals comes if the communication isn't right. So if sometimes in birthing things happen very quickly because it's an emergency, and fine, there isn't much chance to have a conversation. So that's one bit, let's park that. For a significant proportion of people, there are lots of layers of decisions that are made, and there, because there are so many decisions, if they haven't felt that they have been involved in any of those decisions, they can leave that experience feeling just that it was awful and terrible, and feel like there was a lack of respect. Now, the first thing is, it's very difficult to have a conversation about a process if you don't feel empowered to say, wait, hold on, can you just explain to me? Now, health professionals will have all gone through a whole host of learning about communication, and we know that we should be open, and we should be having a dialogue, and we shouldn't be pressuring women or men into certain choices. It is slightly different in birth because it's a high stakes game here, and you know, of course you want baby to be okay, you want mum to be okay. So there's an element of urgency to some decisions, but we I think women, certainly, I can talk for myself, I can't talk for every single Black woman, you know, I think there is always a fear about coming across as too strong, too powerful, the angry Black woman that we're all told we are. And as I've grown, I really don't care about coming across that way, because sometimes I'm angry. And I think, yes, you know, it is worth us as Black women speaking out if we're feeling that we are being pushed in one direction and we don't know why, or it's not been discussed properly, and there's time to do so. It's worth having, you know, just pushing the brakes and saying, well, hold on, can we just go back here? Can you tell me, if I don't go with your plan, what are the risks? And if I do go with your plan and that doesn't work, what's the next step? And that's why going back to doulas, that can be really helpful, because if you're in this situation and you're stressed and you're scared and you don't know what's going on, sometimes having that other person who can say, whoa, hold on, can you just explain that to me, is really helpful, particularly if you haven't got a spouse in the room that can do that. So I think I've got lots of friends who don't feel listened to. I personally had a great experience. I had a wonderful midwife who really did listen to me, particularly near the end when they were when the consultant said she's not progressing, she needs to have an instrumental, and I was, no, please. I don't want an instrumental. And she was absolutely great, but I'm not naive to think that there is probably an aspect of, well, she knew I was a medic. There are lots of people, in the hospital that I know, and we're having a discussion based on things that I know about, and so my experience is likely to be different to someone who potentially may not have been able to advocate for themselves as well. So yeah, it's not uncommon to hear Black women say that they have felt not listened to or not respected, and that is work to do by the medics. Yes, Black women can do things to empower themselves, but at the end of the day, the people looking after you should be open and including you in the conversation. So yes, there's things that Black women can do, but there is a whole lot more that midwives and obs and gynae doctors can do too, to empower women. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Adelaide.
Yeah, gosh, I think I guess the kind of point that you sort of ended on, which is that, you know, it shouldn't be down to the individual, and we just kind of really are stressing that. However, we do recognise that people will want to be prepared so that they can have the best experience possible. I think when I think about sort of like the maternal death rate and things like that, what I also think about are the near misses, you know, the people who didn't die but have been left with quite severe sort of like life-changing impact, about experiences that, you know, there was a healthy mother and there was a healthy baby, but the mental impact or the psychological impact of that experience was just, you know, really far reaching. And I think, you know, again, like I really think, you know, we need to be pushing forward and lobbying in relation to the disparities in the death rate, but also let's bring it kind of back in house and think about the experience for people. Because for me, I also, you know, I know that again we're focusing on kind of Black women and birthing people in maternity care, but actually I sometimes feel like this is a bit of a universal issue that we're facing in terms of positive experiences kind of just being left, you know, it's not, in terms of what's important, health is like right at the top, everybody's healthy, and then the experience kind of just like, you know, is floating away. And one of the things I did actually want to recommend, so there's a campaign called 5 Times More, which is set up by a couple of mothers. They're kind of entrepreneurial birth, you know, kind of, and workers and stuff like that. And they have partnered with an organisation called the Positive Birth Company, who do accessible hypnobirthing courses. It's all digital. And one of the key things that they looked at was sort of financial barriers, but actually this is a Positive Birth Company, they'd never considered like potential cultural barriers, and so they've partnered together with 5 Times More, and they're offering 100 free hypnobirthing places every month, and you can register for that on the 5 Times More website. Now hypnobirthing is like a whole lot of stuff. If it sounds a bit too hippie, then don't worry about it, but a lot of it kind of just incorporates sort of the basic physiology of labour and birth, as well as thinking about how to make decisions, how to handle information as it's presented to you, how to ask the kind of probing questions that will actually get you to you know, rather than general risk, your specific risk and absolute risk of things happening. So instead of somebody saying to you, oh, well, it's double the risk if you do this thing or don't do this thing, get them to tell you like what's the actual number of the thing that I'm engaging in. Sometimes it's because they can't remember the statistics, so it's quite a nice, it's quite a good challenge to have. It also kind of talks about various decision making tools. You know, if something's presented to you, what are the benefits, what are the risks, what are the alternatives, you know, what are your instincts, you know, can you do nothing? And then once you've kind of done all that, you give your sweet smile and you say, I'm just going to have some time to think about this. And then, you know, you come back to the professional, like when you're ready, if there is time to do so. So I think that in terms of kind of challenging things, preparation is so key. The number of people that I meet who have no idea about what pregnancy is going to be like, what having a baby is going to be like, what to expect. They've got everything they know from One Born Every Minute, or, you know, other kind of horrific TV programs that I tell people not to watch. You know, you can really be the agent for change. You can be your own advocate, and you can do that by being armed with information. Because then you can question everything that comes your way. If it doesn't feel right to you, you can say, oh, well, I read this, you know, article, or I read this paper, and can you tell me about this? And, you know, you might get a health professional that like sucks in their breath a little bit, you know, but ultimately they need to deal with it, because you deserve to be informed. And you like, I know we say like knowledge is power, but it really, really is. Because the thing about this kind of power paradigm that exists within healthcare, and this is outside of maternity as well, is that it's deemed that the health professional has all the knowledge, and so they kind of carry the power. And so although I might have an idea of what I want, if I don't really know, I'm just going to look at you and say, but you know exactly what's best for me because you did all the training and stuff like that. And, you know, to a certain point that is true, but also this is yours. You own this. Whenever you step foot into a clinical area, into a GP surgery, into an antenatal appointment, you have the power. This is about you. This is about your experience, your body, your baby. So claim that and go and say, right, you know, you work for me. Have that thought in your head. You work for me, and that is the best way to kind of get what you need. I'm going to make myself very unpopular now, but
no, thank you so much for that, because I think it's really important, especially just generally for people to have knowledge in terms of the birthing process, what they need to be aware of. So for myself, for the last question, I'm just going to ask to Adelaide, what considerations or difficulties do you think queer Black mothers or those within the trans community who are planning on conceiving or in the process may have?
So I guess the biggest thing I would say is like erasure. Basically, they're not represented anywhere, really. You know, we've talked a lot about Black women and Black mothers, and the reason that we've done that is because that is how the research is presented. Mm-hmm. And it's important to recognise that some of those people that were recorded as women may not have identified as women. Mm-hmm. And I think that we could go... one of the things that I found, so I did, when I did my degree, I did my dissertation on experiences of specifically lesbian women, but actually the research is now wider to kind of show experiences of bisexual women and trans parents as well, and that includes non-binary people. And really sort of the issue that pervades is that sexual reproductive health and maternity health in particular is very heteronormative. So that is the assumption that everybody is heterosexual. It's very cis-normative. So that is the assumption that everybody identifies as the gender that they were born with. And we know that that is not the case. And for years, people have just kind of been suffering in silence as they access care and stuff like that. And I think we just really need to be mindful of the language that we use, even if something as simple as that, before we even think about kind of the structural things that we can change, like forms that have mums and dads on, and you know, mothers and fathers, or you know, people that don't automatically refer to husbands when they see that you're wearing a wedding ring. You know, we can all sort of be really conscious about right, let's think about the language, let's give other people opportunities to tell us about their situation. Don't see two you know, female presenting people and say, oh, is this your sister? Or like, oh, you've got really interesting energy here, is this your best friend? It's like, no, that's my wife. Yeah, cool, thanks for making an already kind of anxious and stressful time even more anxious and stressful. You know, there's something that is called minority stress, which is not just, it was kind of the term in itself, the model was initially coined to refer to LGBT people, but actually we recognise that lots of people that are marginalised experience a stress which relates to how they're going to be treated when they access services. So this is something that lots of, you know, Black women and birthing people might be experiencing now, because they're reading all these statistics and they're worrying, when I go, I'm going to be mistreated, I'm the way, you know, people aren't going to respect my decisions. But so if you take those two things and we kind of add them together with our favourite term, intersectionality, this is the idea that, you know, people don't just identify as one thing. I'm not Black in this space and a woman in this space and gay in this space. You know, I'm all of these things all the time. And so, you know, if I was thinking about navigating services, I think, you know, being a midwife is probably the thing that is totally in my favour. But otherwise, I would probably be worried about the sort of care that I would receive, how I'm constantly having to be on guard in case, you know, someone thinks my wife is my best friend or whatever, you know, because that is hard work, it's exhausting. And what we also know is that minority stress also correlates with a fear of childbirth, and a fear of childbirth has a whole other kind of, you know, kind of cascade of things that come with that. So if you take away anything from today alongside the conversation that we're having about sort of you know, Black birthing people, also think about how might other people struggle to access services, how might other people struggle to be seen, who are we not representing, who have we not heard from, and I think that will just serve you in really good stead going forward.
Thank you so much for that. Aisha, would you like to add anything?
I mean, I don't think so. Just to say that I think that healthcare professionals can do a lot more work on just thinking beyond what they see most commonly. And we all know we're all trained at the beginning to ask open questions and to not go into something with a judgment or a pre-perception, much like you would never, or I would never ask if I saw a man and a woman together and one seemed much older. You wouldn't assume that it's father and daughter. It may be husband and wife, whatever. So I think if we treat everybody, if we start off with, actually, we don't know until someone tells us, that's quite important. So it's important, you know, if everyone asks everyone else what their pronouns are, or then it becomes the normality, and people don't feel like they're sticking out like a sore thumb. And maybe it will enable people to be more, or to feel like they are being listened to and they're being seen. And it's hard to feel that way if you're always treated with an element of surprise. Oh gosh, you know, that's unhelpful. And as I always say, it's scary enough. I don't think I really realised how scary going through the whole thing is. It's scary enough being pregnant, going in labour and having birth, let alone feeling that you're not being listened to, feeling that you're being judged, feeling that as someone walks outside of the room, they might be having a little gossip over there. You know, it's really important that we see people as people, and we allow everyone, no matter how they identify, no matter who they're there with, to be valued, listened to and respected. And if we can't do that, then we're doing something wrong.
Yes. Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to quickly answer two of the questions. I'll ask both of you. Two of the questions that we received. The first one was, how about prenatal mood and anxiety disorders? So I'm assuming in reference to general birthing process.
Yeah. I was just before you go, because I feel like you've got good stuff. I'm just going to come in with some stats, which is basically that, suicide is one of the second highest cause of maternal death, and the highest cause of maternal death in between sort of up to a year, sort of like in this prolonged period. And I think unfortunately, in a lot of communities, there is stigma around mental health and accessing services. So I think that it really is like imperative that we kind of get really good at having these conversations sort of with each other, the people that are really close to us, that we love, but also thinking about your mental health as part of your physical health. Like, your brain is, an organ as like anything else. So just kind of taking on responsibility to look after that. Sorry, you go, Aisha.
I was just going to say cultural barriers are a big thing when we're thinking about anxiety and depression in Black people in general. So we know that Black people are more likely to present later than other ethnicities, and it's complex. The reasons for that are really complex. We absolutely have got issues with regards to an acceptance that we are just as anyone else is, and can suffer with low mood and can suffer with anxiety. And until that message comes across, that actually, even if your family sort of say, oh, it's not a big deal, sort of pull your socks up, it's all fine. If you come and see a medical professional, we will listen and we will help, and you're not alone, and this is not abnormal. This is something that I deal with day in, day out. So it's incredibly difficult for people who come from societies and communities that don't really understand mental health problems, because naturally they themselves have an undercurrent of it's not a big deal, I know I can just it's fine, I'll just get over it, things will be better, I'm sure it'll be better next week or next month. And unless we tackle that, it's going to continue to be a problem. The other thing is, if there are any health professionals listening, if you ask the question, oh, how are you feeling? The vast majority of people will say, I'm fine, because that's what we do. That's how we respond. But actually, it's worth asking some deeper questions. Are you enjoying pregnancy? How did your birth go? Was it a positive experience for you? Do you sometimes think about the birth? What do you think about when you're thinking about the birth? Do you ever worry about having another baby? There are questions that you can ask that are going to get deeper into how someone is feeling, rather than a very basic, how are you? Because if you ask how you are, I'm fine, and we all are. And it's one of the most unhelpful questions, because I ask it all the time to friends, but it is unhelpful, because on the whole, people respond in a very blanket way because they don't believe that you're truly asking. So unless, if we start from the point that if you ask someone if they're fine, they're probably going to say everything's all right, it doesn't mean they are. And let's try and remember, as a society, there's this idea that Black women are strong and they're powerful and they're matriarchs, and they've you know, they're all okay, they hold a family up, but they're humans, and we hurt the same as everyone else, and we cry the same as everyone else, and we experience mental health conditions as everyone else does. We may present later, we may not present at all, but they you know, that they are there.
Thank you so much, both of you, for those contributions. I just wanted to answer the last question. So the last question is from a midwifery lecturer who wanted to ask about improving education. What do you think are the most important things we need to focus on? And they would like some ideas of what you think should be enhanced in education programs. So if you would both like to just comment 2 things, perhaps.
Yeah, so this has come from my program director. Hi, Chris. So
hello. That's an amazing, thank you. What an amazing seminar.
I think I would say, like, there's something really beneficial in thinking about the history of obstetric and gynecology, because I think a lot of what is sort of happening now is about really uncovering what has gone before and what's sort of been brushed under the carpet. And so even just, you know, thinking about like race-based medicine as a module that people can have a conversation about, and Marion Sims, like, lots of people don't really know about his kind of history, about how he experimented on you know, slaves without you know, black women who were enslaved without their consent, and then took all that knowledge to hospitals where he practiced white women with their consent under anaesthetics, you know. And there's a lot of that within you know, various points of healthcare, that even teaching those kinds of things would be really really helpful. Things like, you know, this idea that pelvis shapes may be different, and yet there's not necessarily evidence to back it up. It kind of came from a time, again, when we're talking about justifying slavery and the mistreatment of people and trying to set all those kind of things, that still pervades black people having thicker skin, people to address the kind of myths that are floating around, because I'm still hearing them and seeing them, you know, perpetuated as I'm in practice. So I would say that I've also got some friends, so My Midwives Initiative, they're running unconscious bias training, which is available for midwives, but they're also doing university sort of content as well. So I can happily put you in contact with them. You know, they've got a really great program thought out, and I think that, you know, there were just little things that you could do to start that would make a difference. And I think thinking about history and stuff like that and how that impacts our structures of today is definitely one of them.
Thank you for that. Aisha, do you have any input that you would like to give?
I mean, I would also say that in addition, I think it's really important that we centre Black voices when we're talking about Black women, and I think when women talk about their own experiences, that is likely to stick in people's minds. Much like, you know, when I think about my training as a doctor, what I read from a book and what I saw face to face will stick in my head forever. What you read from a book, you kind of have to keep rereading every couple of years. So it's really important that we centre the voices that we're talking about, and we are open to discussing our own prejudices. If we start from the viewpoint that actually, unless people are honest about how they think about other people, we can't move forward. And I think it's important for midwife trainees or doctors to just remove themselves from this holier than thou, I'm a wonderful person, I care about everyone equally, and I could never, you know, fall foul of of discrimination. That's not true, because you are, well, most of us, certainly if you're born in this country, you are born into a system that centers whiteness, that promotes whiteness, and others everyone else. And as soon as everyone else is othered and not centered, that can become problematic in healthcare. For me, I think what I would like to see is centering of Black voices, and honesty in people's thoughts about their own individual biases. And I'm not saying people should stand up in a lecture theatre and say, my bias is X, Y, Z. But, you know, I understand that might be difficult for people. But I do think people should be able to reflect honestly and think about what they can do to work to ensure that those biases do change, but also do not impact on their future work, and that they can stand forward and speak if they see or hear something that is not right. Because I know that I've been in situations where I've heard things and I've thought, I'm sorry, did someone just say that? And I've said something, and forevermore have been known as, oh, you can't say anything in front of her, you know, she's that angry Black woman. So if you want to be a true ally, and if you want to really change the system, you have to be empowered and strong to say, hold on, actually, I'm not happy with that, or actually, I think maybe we're judging this person, and if we can create the midwives of tomorrow and the doctors of tomorrow who are strong enough in the face of any racism, sexism, transphobia, whatever they're seeing, then we would have done a good job. So that's what I hope. That's what I hope for the future. That's what I hope if I ever have a daughter who's birthing. I just hope that the future is going to look brighter, because we're having these conversations, and we have lecturers who want to make a difference, and I think that is brilliant.
Thank you so much. I do want to say thank you, especially to both of our speakers today. I feel like your contributions are amazing. I definitely learned a lot, so I hope that the audience also learned a lot. Thank you as well to all of our audience and those who asked questions. I did just want to say quickly that I will be doing a follow-up email via Eventbrite with both of our speakers today, with all the organisation details that they have personally. And I will also be sending out a survey, so if you could respond to that as soon as possible. And just thank you. Would either of you like to say anything before we head off?
Just a huge thanks. It really makes me feel like this work is reaching people, because you know you're listening in and you're engaged, and you want to see what the problem is and how we can work as a society to change things. So you are the beacons. If what you've heard today, you can go and tell one person who tells another person who tells another person, things will slowly get better. So thank you to everyone.
Yeah, amazing. I think I would just say the same, and I would also say, you know, if you're here and you're not a Black woman or birthing person, think about how you can be an ally, and think about what that means, and you know, think about yourself, but also one thing that you can do maybe. And as Ash said, it could just be spreading the word to one person. It could just be a post, or sharing a picture, or having a conversation with somebody, because we really just, you know, the thing about being a part of a marginalised community that's sometimes a minority is that you need the majority to stand with you to make those changes. So yeah, we really need you to stand with us, and you know, think about what you can do going forward. And just thank you, Keir, for this like brilliant platform to be able to talk about stuff. And I'm happy to be contacted. You know, if you want any resources, I'll happily send you anything that you want.
We'll make make sure to put both of your details down in the email as well. But again, thank you everybody for tuning in today, and that is the end of our session. So